What's up, everyone? This is Sean from Room 9 Podcast. Just wanted to give a little introduction to this next episode. I sit down with my little sister, Megan, and we kind of just talk about what my addiction was like from her point of view and things and the struggles that she had to go through while we're on it. We're going to start doing this a little more often. I wanted to sit down and kind of do this with lots of family members and maybe just addicts that just tell their story and kind of where they're at on this journey of recovery. So as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing with us with our audio quality. It has been quite the challenge, quite the journey of the last 3 weeks of just trying to totally get in here. But, we are still in our infancy stage of this podcast. So thank you again for your support. And don't forget to check us out and subscribe on YouTube, Room 9 Podcast. All right, thank you. All right, we are recorded.
Awesome.
This is where it begins. I'm sitting here. This is Sean from Room 9 Podcast, doing a little solo episode without my co-partner in crime, Andrew. He is off in Albany to some AA meeting, but I'm going to sit down here with my lovely sister that I have across the desk from me, and we're going to kind of go over what my addiction and everything was like for her. So, Megan Elizabeth, here you are.
Yes.
Finally in the room.
In my room. My old room.
Your old room. In the now Room 9 studio. Go ahead and we'll get you a little closer to the mic there.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, that's good.
Sorry,
Get a little better volume going here.
All right.
So that way it helps my pathetic audio skills, audio editing skills when I start to do it. But yeah, it was you're the first one to do this. I want to start this series down and get it going with lots of just family members and different addicts and just them trying to tell their story and what everything was going on. But you're going to be the first one, probably the biggest, craziest one.
Here we
Maybe
go.
Right up there with Christine. Probably the craziest stories of everything that was going on. But I don't know not much where to start with it. But I mean, when did you kind of start getting this idea that something was really going on?
I would say before the actual, what I call D-Day of your addiction fully coming out, which was in January. In the Christmas season, I've seen you a lot more for Thanksgiving and the holidays, and I definitely started to realize you had lost a lot of weight. You were very thin. In the past, you had some digestive issues years and years ago, so I was thinking maybe something was going on, and you had even kind of stated that with Christine, oh, something's happening, I don't know, I'm not feeling good. You weren't eating a lot, and so I definitely noticed how thin you were. I remember Christmas Eve, you coming to my house, and I was like, whoa, what's going on with him? He looks thinner than I am. Like, what's happening here? And you were very, spastic. Like, you were never staying in one place. You're always getting up and moving and not very relaxed at all, which I felt like was unlike you. You usually could be very content just sitting someplace. And even when you had your books out, you'd be reading, but then you'd be getting up and moving and just all sorts of things. So I definitely started to realize things were a little off, even before your addiction fully came out in January.
Oh, the good old Christmas Eve. Yeah, I think that's probably when that December, November is probably when it really was getting to the point where I don't even think I was enjoying being high anymore. I think it was just trying not to be sick and uncomfortable, which definitely comes from you definitely start seeing that in a lot of addicts when they're hitting that point of just, this isn't even fun anymore, that they can't sit still and all they can think about, you just become so consumed by it and everything else. So it was around Thanksgiving, then you said, which we're coming up on a year on that.
Yes, we are.
We are.
Yeah.
Going on, I think I have 7 months clean in 2 days.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, which is pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, what do you think kind of your biggest mistakes along, with my addiction were, as far as to people who are out there listening who have family members who are just consumed with addiction, and kind of I wanted you to go over what some of your mistakes or what you would do differently, maybe throughout.
For sure. I definitely was struggling with, I always kind of correlated the words love and trust together, that love is based upon trust. Trust is based upon loving someone. You kind of get this, I just felt like they correlated the definitions of them. And so I've always struggled when I felt like I wasn't trusting someone. I never wanted to express that concern because I was afraid that then they would interpret that as me not loving them or me not caring about them. And so even right before we actually found out about your addiction, the week leading up to it, there were 2 things that had happened that were very red flags in my gut. And I was like, why am I feeling this way? And one, I saw you on the corner talking to some guy in a car, and I was like, I have no idea who that person was. And I know most of your friends, but instead of just saying, hey Sean, who was that person? What was that all about? I didn't even ask you about it. I was just like, it's fine. I trust him. I don't want him to think I don't trust him. And then the one night when we were all staying in a hotel together with your son and daughter, with my niece and nephew, and there were just some weird things that were happening there, and definitely out of character things. And I woke up pretty early in the morning, and you were in the bathroom, and I heard some very interesting not bathroom sounds, and I don't know what was going on, but it seemed like you were just moving things around a lot, and I was like, what is he doing? And it sounded like you were getting sick at one point. And again, didn't ask you, just was like, nope, I don't want him to think I didn't trust him. And then after finding out that all of this stuff was actually happening, and then you tried to get clean on your own, there were a ton of red flags still that I was afraid to talk about, that I was afraid to say, because I just wanted to know that you knew I believed in you and I wasn't second guessing any of your behaviors. Now I realize that you can love someone deeply and still struggle with trust with someone, and trust being broken takes time and patience to kind of readjust and to find that trust again with each other. But just that idea, that was one big thing, is I wish I would have spoken out in a kind and loving way, and actually I was not loving you by ignoring behaviors that were destructive to your life. And so I think I did a decent job of when towards the end, before I had realized you relapsed, there were some very strange behaviors that weekend that I kind of was picking up on and definitely calling you out on and asking you hey, this is weird, this seems off. And
to kind of recap. Yeah, I did get clean for about a month on my own at our parents' house, and then my assessment on all that was the reason why they didn't stay clean is because that's all I did, what they kind of in recovery call dry drunk, where you just stop using but you don't take care of anything else. So I got clean, and I've done all these things to hurt people that loved me in the past, and I got clean for about a month, and then all that guilt and shame came back up, and I just didn't want to talk about any of it, so I kept trying to keep it under the carpet. And then so about a month of that, and then that's about all that lasted, and then I went back into it.
And so that was just something that I had asked you about, and I decided even your answers were not very, when I was questioning you, hey, why do you need this money, or hey, why are you running around and going to all these places, and all these weird things were happening that weekend that were very, when I looked back, it was oh, that's addict behavior, that's addict Sean, not clean Sean, not sober Sean. And so instead of freaking out, though, which is something I think is so important, when I started to feel like things were off, instead of just getting angry and being no, I know you're using again, getting upset, I really just took a step back, and I said, okay, I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to keep my eyes open, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to call you out on things when I think they're happening. And within 2 days, you had already, kind of dug your own grave in that, and it was very obvious what was happening. So by the time I actually figured it out, there was no denying it. And when you tried to lie to me, I said, Sean, I know this isn't right, something's wrong, you're using again. And I just kept saying that. Every little lie you said, I was nope, that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, you're using again, because it was just very, very evident. And by that time, I had kind of talked to some of our other family members and noticed what was happening. But just that idea of also, I didn't feel like I really lost my cool on you in the midst of that. Maybe there were times where I was emotionally heightened and crying and upset about, just out of fear of what was going to happen. But just really staying cool and understanding that trust, it takes time to rebuild, and it's okay to do that and be honest about that. I didn't want to hurt you and say hey, I don't trust what you're doing right now. But even now into your recovery, that is something that I have to be able to do, is when I'm questioning things, that doesn't mean I don't love you or care about you. It means I do care about you, and I just more than anything want you to be better, just like you want to be better, and be clean. And so it's kind of, I guess, two of my main things, I guess I would say. But
yeah, it's interesting to think about. I think that's got to be one of the toughest lines for somebody, a family member, to go through is, do I sit here and, tell them I don't trust them and do all these things and kind of push them away more, or do I, just kind of enable them and keep enabling them. And there is that final, I think there's a point where, I mean, at least in my addiction, where it didn't matter how you dealt with anything or how you did it, I was going to get offensive, and I've found that I've always used that as a reason to get upset, and when I'm upset, I can't have an excuse now to go use.
Yeah.
Like, I remember there being points where I would, get a few beers in me, and then I would look for something. I would look for something to be upset about or angry about, even if it was just like an experience in my life, to reflect on it, to get myself worked up to the point where I could justify going and using and try to take away that guilt and shame from it, which has been a very interesting thing to reflect back on. I mean, even before my heroin use, looking at my, just drinking beer and smoking cannabis every day, Christine would always say something, my significant other would always say something about, that she doesn't like it, I don't like that you're doing this every day. I feel like you have to do this every day to kind of enjoy your day or whatever it is. And my response would always be, well, I don't ever get drunk, I don't ever treat you differently. And we probably had that conversation, we've been together almost 5 years, probably 6-7 times, and that would be my response. Like, I don't understand what your problem is. Like, I don't get drunk, I don't treat you differently, I'm not staying out partying all night, I'm going to bed a decent time, I'm getting up early, I'm doing things, I'm being productive as I guess I could be in that time of my life, just with that lack of discipline. But it was always there, and so even how many times she told me that, I could combat it with something. And then being forced to get kind of sober through jail till now, over the last 7 months, like, looking back, it was like my judgment was way off, my thinking was so cloudy, and it's crazy how when you're in it, you don't see it. It's like you can't tell anybody anything.
Right. So
in order, I don't know how, like, I've thought about a lot, how do you show somebody they're in this middle of addiction, and I don't think it's necessarily possible.
Right.
So you have to kind of find, as a family member, I think, find a balance of, I'm not going to enable you, but I'm going to still love you, I'm going to still encourage you, and try to share with you what I'm feeling, what I'm doing.
Right.
But sometimes it's like a lost cause. I mean, if the person, doesn't want to do it for themselves, and they don't feel like they're at a point where they need to change or fix something, it's no matter what you do as a family member, I mean, nothing's going to change anything. Right. And I feel like that becomes, I guess, I'm not the family member, I'm the actual addict, but I don't know how that was for you as far as feeling helpless, that state of helplessness, and just, seeing, somebody you love, your big brother, lost in this addiction and not be able to do anything about it.
There is this definite feeling of a lack of control, and I think anyone you talk to at some point in their life has struggled with control, the idea of control, and controlling other people, controlling circumstances, and we all find time and time again that we can't control other people, and we can't control everything that happens in our life. There are obviously certain things we can control, but a lot of that I have found is the way that we react to things. And so I remember, when they kind of, one of your close friends and mom and dad, and they had the intervention with you because they had a feeling you were using pills, and I wasn't able to be there because of circumstances in my life. But I remember going to bed that night and falling asleep and having this crazy dream about you, and not knowing, like, in the dream you were dying in the dream, and I was like, Sean, get up, come on, you gotta get up, and I was begging you, as if in the dream I felt like you had a choice, you could either die or you could get up and start fighting. And I remember waking up and not knowing what you chose, and that was very hard for me. And I called Mom to see how the intervention had gone, the intervention quotes, had gone the night before, and she shared with me that it wasn't pills, that it was heroin, that it started with pills, but then it moved into heroin, and it was like a punch to the gut. You hear all the time about people overdosing on heroin, and obviously this happens with pills too, but the word heroin, I just feel like it's kind of like a heavy hitter nowadays.
Yeah, it has a heavy weight with it.
Right, exactly. And I just thought, oh my gosh. And it was a Sunday morning, so I went to church that morning, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to come see you. I was so emotionally drawn from things that had happened the past few weeks before that, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say to him. What do I say to him? And I remember I called one of my close friends, and I just shared with her the fear I had and the anxiety, and she just said, you just go and tell him you love him. That's all you have to say. You don't have to have this long, in-depth conversation. You just go and you hug him and you tell him you love him. And so I remember coming home to Mom and Dad's house, and you were kind of standing in the living room looking pretty horrible. looking pretty bad. And I just went up and gave you a hug, and I told you I loved you, and we sobbed together. And then I just felt it in my mind, etched in my mind over and over again, like, this isn't the end of your story. And I just kept repeating that, like, this isn't the end of the story. This can't be the end of your story. And I truly felt that in those moments. Like, I couldn't control your steps, your actions that were going to follow that. But throughout everything, throughout then you relapsing, and then jail, and then being moved to rehab, you know, far away from home, and then now coming back and going through Horizon Village, and then being home now out of there. And there was just this constant thing in my head that was like, this isn't the end. This isn't the end of the story. And so it kind of helped me with my fear of just having hope that no matter what the outcome was, that something good would come from it. And now I've gone to places I never expected to go. Never thought I'd be visiting someone in jail. Never thought I'd be picking up the phone and saying, someone from the Erie County Holding Center is trying to contact you. Those were tough times. It was tough to go and see you like that and to experience that, but then it led to great times, being a part of Horizon Village and spending time in groups and like getting support. Like, that is so important as a family member of addiction. I remember your counselor saying from Horizon Village, like, that you don't ever have to pick up a drug for your whole life to completely have addiction ruin your life, because of the people in your life who are actively involved in it. And that is true. It totally turned my world upside down, but now it's created this new found understanding and learning that I have a compassion for people I didn't used to have a compassion for. I have an understanding of the world of addiction that I didn't fully understand. And also how in my world it has seeped in, maybe not with substances, but other things that I depend on, and how that is negative. And so at the end of the day, I'm no better than you. My addictions are just different. The things I look for, the approval of others, how I'm addicted to the approval of others. And when I get it, I do get this dopamine response in my mind. Like, I feel so good about myself. And then I start working for the approval of others all the time. And that's something I have to combat every day. And so obviously the withdrawals of that are different. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I understand to an extent of like what it is to be addicted to things, and having it kind of rule your thought process and your thinking. And so it's been such a growing time for me. And just one thing I want to say is just understanding that aspect of, I said to you one day, I said, I just want my, the old Sean back. I just want the old Sean back. And you said to me, I don't ever want to go back to the old Sean. And I was thinking, obviously, like, pre-addiction Sean, but the idea that pre-addiction Sean still led to addicted Sean, right? And so there's this whole thing in life where we have to change and grow. And the same thing with me. There are points where I was like, I wish I could just turn my world back, where I didn't have to experience these things, or I didn't have to think the way I have to think now with like a certain distrust towards people and things that I'm combating. But that is creating a strength in me, right? And that is growing me in ways that like I wouldn't have have happened before. And so just understanding that like these things that seem so dark and negative, even in the midst of still going through it and not knowing what's happening, it's good. It is good, and it can be used to really grow and strengthen you and the people around you. So,
yeah, I think that's an awesome point. Because I always say that too. When I would say to myself, "Oh, I just want my old life back," and then I'd think, "Wait, no, I don't. Like, I want my new life, to start, which it already has started." But taking these crappy times, and I wonder, because with our brother and sister dying, I've always looked at this example. How that set me in this world of self-pity, and just, oh, poor me, the world owes me something, just walking around with this chip on my shoulder. But then when I started to realize, like, you can use these times either to sit in self-pity and feel sorry for yourself and never grow, and then just be stagnant your whole life, or you can take crappy times and use them to grow, to learn, how am I going to get better at this, how am I going to learn to do this. And I think that's the biggest thing about self-pity, is it sends us into this trap of, poor me, things should be handed to me, I shouldn't have to work for anything, everybody feels sorry for me. Or you can go out of that self-pity and get into, well, what am I going to learn from this, how am I going to grow? Like, to pick yourself back up and just kind of learn from it. And I've always said, I don't know if I would go back and really change anything. As terrible as jail was, as terrible as long and drawn out as the rehabs have been, like, I've learned so much about just gaining confidence in myself and getting rid of just these character flaws in myself, and how am I going to change those. And I don't think I would have ever have been able to do those things if it wasn't for being addicted to heroin. I mean, I did some really messed up things that I'm not proud of.
Right.
A lot of amends I have to make, but if it wasn't for that, my addiction, there's so many different things that maybe I would have never been able to face and, to learn and grow and, just learn to love myself, forgive myself, accept myself, and have confidence in myself.
Right.
I mean, all those things came from the beginning of my addiction. And so it's kind of weird to kind of get into that whole good or bad thing, something good or bad. But, I mean, anything is what you make of it. I think essentially that's what it comes down to. And I've always said I'm very blessed with the support system I have, because there's a lot of people who have just taken every family member through the ringer so many times that they've had nobody to come visit them, nobody that cares. Nobody that wants to learn anything about addiction that they can help, like you guys, you and Mom, and Christine was so involved, as much as you possibly could be. And that was a beautiful thing about Horizons. Tuesday nights, Saturday mornings, they had groups. You'd come out, we'd visit for an hour, and they'd have all these different groups that teach you about different things and how to react and how not to enable. And what kind of what is like the most you got from those groups, family groups, going out there, and the one-on-one sessions, of course.
It's amazing how, with most trials in life, you can feel so isolated and by yourself, and a lot of times you do get into that even self-pity talk that you're saying, like, no one understands, I'm the only one going through this. And even though like that's probably not possible, right, you still do feel very alone. And so the biggest thing for me with going to the groups was when I would hear other family members talk about their loved one's addiction, they would say things that like literally word for word were things I thought. And I was like, whoa, how does that person know what's going on in my brain? Like literally the exact things that I would think or things I would struggle with, they would just verbalize it so well. And that was huge for me, is just to know that, okay, I'm not a heartless person for thinking that. I'm not a weak person for like not being able to process through that. There's strength in the understanding you don't know everything. There's strength in that, of just saying like, this is tough, this is hard. And that was really great, was just to be able to meet people who hear their stories. And some of them, like you said, had gone through it much longer than we had, as far as like Mom and I was supporting you. And yet they still had faith and they still had hope, because that is something that I fear of, like, what if it happens again? And what if like someone else in my life comes out with an addiction and it's continually relapse after relapse, or all of these things? Like, would I still be able to stay hopeful? Would I still be able to have hope and to look at people who had been involved in the world of addiction, 15, 20, even one man, 35 years, crazy, and to understand that they still had hope? That was really good for me. I just needed that. That was encouragement. And definitely one of the biggest things was boundaries and setting up boundaries. And, signs of relapse, when we talk about that. And so I think often if you know the signs of relapse of your loved one, you can then set up boundaries that will easily be able to tell if those things are happening. And that was also something I felt, before I started actually learning about addiction, was that I felt like boundaries in any relationship were a way of like, saying I don't trust you and I'm setting this up to protect myself and I'm not going to be vulnerable or real. But that's not it at all. Setting up healthy boundaries in relationships is you being vulnerable. It's you saying like, hey, like this isn't okay to cross these lines. Like that would hurt me. And sometimes we struggle to say that. We struggle to identify the things that are difficult to us, or weaknesses for us, or whatever it may be. And so even talking with you and having opportunities in the groups where you guys were with us on Tuesday nights, having opportunities to get your perspective and to hear your words and the words of other addicts that were there too, was just extremely helpful for me to understand, like, oh, that little behavior that I kept saying wasn't a big deal actually was, and it was a sign of something happening. And so that was just huge for me, was just to learn and to get ideas from the counselors and know that these people were also talking to you guys. And so they have, a perspective on what's happening more than I do. And they're coming and helping us, like, just obviously not saying anything personal, but just saying like, hey, like, these are the things you need to look out for or watch out for. And, just guiding us to these good discussions and thought processes. So.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've been saying a lot about, is how awesome it was for Horizons to have that, that opportunity for families to come out and just kind of learn and go with it. Because it's funny, seeing it through all different, eyes, and if that support can really make the biggest difference in an addict's life. If they know they have, because I've met so many people who are amazing people who have done really effed up things, including myself, really effed up things that people that they love and that love them over an addiction. And that's why some people, if you don't go and, I guess, educate yourself as a family member, you're going to really miss out on a lot of things of like, oh, wow, well, he isn't just a terrible human being, or she isn't just a terrible person. Like, there's something else going on here that is causing this. Because there was times when I would, go into Christine's house or mom and dad's house crying because I didn't want to do it, but I just didn't want to be sick either, and I needed money, so I was going to find something or somehow or some way to get money so I didn't have to feel sick. And then it's just, it's a terrible thing to be crying and doing something you don't want to do, but you're kind of still doing it at the same time. You just want to feel better physically. And so what a big struggle that is. For somebody to go through, and I think there's a lot of people out there family members who haven't educated themselves, who haven't looked into different things, and they just think this person, just stop using drugs. It's that simple. Come on, just stop using. And it's not obviously that simple, or else we wouldn't be in this epidemic that we're in at this point. And drugs can be one of the it's a crazy thing, because like you said, we all do things in an addictive way to kind of like cope with something, whatever it is, and not everybody uses drugs for that. But drugs, obviously, you get into that, and that becomes a very physiological thing as well as a psychological thing. So you have both of those things. And I find that's one of the toughest things to kind of go through as a family member, is that lack of understanding of what's going on, which can just build resentments and anger. And I remember kind of shifting gears a little bit, thinking about that time we were actually in this room when I was staying in it. That is now the Room 9 podcast, and I just remember, just crying and being like, I'm your older brother. Like, I should have been a better example. I should be the one teaching you, showing you things, and helping you out with problems instead of, the other way around. Right. And that was one of the moments that is probably impressed in my brain the most out of everything, was that moment of feeling, helpless as an older brother, to you, that I should have been, a better example and everything else. And which I kind of turned that around now, and I feel like, I'm showing you in a way, like, how to still fight through some of the toughest things in life, and some of, the toughest challenges to get through in existence. Yeah. Which I thought was a pretty cool, what am I trying to say? A pretty cool, realization. Right. For everything.
For sure. And that's something, too, that it's like, I've always felt, since being a young girl, that you always were able to help people through things, and you had an ability to speak with people and, show kindness and a tenderness that sometimes I don't always have. I can be very, rambunctious and full of energy and crazy, and sometimes I don't stop to see the needs of others. And I think that's something I always valued about you. And now to be able to see on the other side of this, you coming out of it and seeing the growth, and even doing this podcast, is like, listening to them has been so encouraging for me, and I'm just really proud of you. And to see that you're using these gifts that you have, this ability to communicate and to also just understand people and be kind towards others, it's amazing for me. It's a great thing, and I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, even when I have to look back on the things that did happen and the things that were really tough and hard, to see where it's at now and how it's being used. And it's just a great thing to experience, for sure.
Yes, it is. Yeah, yes. It's been definitely an awesome few months, kind of coming back around here. It's going to be a different Thanksgiving and a different Christmas this year. Yes. That is for sure. But kind of, one kind of final question I got for you that I was thinking about. I should have sent this one to her earlier to see, give her time to think about. But, what is, not only one thing that you can kind of give to other family members, but what do you think you pulled out of this whole mess, like one of the most important things that you've learned?
Yeah. Oh, that's tough.
There's
so many things that are flooding my mind. I think this idea of perseverance, I don't know why that's the first word that popped up in my brain when you asked me that question, is this idea of persevering through trials. And my higher power is Jesus. I'm a Christian. And a verse that I've always held on to from the Bible is Galatians 6:9, where it talks about, like, do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And that is something that I've held on to for a while, and time again I've seen in different seasons that is critical in life, right? It's just continuing to persevere, and that in time, like, this harvest will come. You will reap a harvest, and this idea of, like, restoration of things that have fallen apart or things that have gone completely wrong, and just seeing those things restored. And that's the biggest thing that I would just say, is to hold on to the hope of, like, things being restored, and whether that be within your family structure, with your friendships, or just in yourself, because there is so much pain that comes with addiction. And I think, even on the other side of it, addicts know how much they've hurt the people that they love. Like, I'm sure that's not something that you're, like, blind to. But there are also parts of that you don't fully understand, right, as the person who's in the active addiction compared to the one who's supporting them. There are nights that you weren't there when that person woke up in the middle of the night and was fearful for your life and was wondering where you were and felt very, very helpless and powerless. But to continue to go back to those points of just saying, like, you do the best that you can as a person supporting them, but understanding, like, everyone's choices are their own choices, right? And not carrying the weight of that, but just constantly being brought back to this place of love and grace and mercy, for everyone. And knowing too, a big thing that I think I had to come to the realization of, as much as I wanted you to kick it and to be done with this and, like, beat it, I know that deep down you didn't want to live the way you were living either. You desired it just as much as I did, if not more, because it was affecting you even crazier than it was affecting me. And just that whole idea of, like, doing whatever I needed to do for you to help you and to be there and to show you that I loved you. Knowing that I couldn't control your actions, but just being there. And so that is just something that I would say I've learned through it, is this idea of not trying to control others, not trying to make people fit in my box, but just really loving people truly in every way, and the words I say and the way I act, and just living in that, and whatever that looks like for you and your families. And it might look different for every person in the relationships that you're in. It is going to look different. But for me, that was just really being there for you and just telling you I loved you. When you relapsed, I didn't want to yell at you or scream at you, because I didn't feel like that was going to be effective. I just wanted you to know that I loved you, because I didn't know when would be the last time I might see you. And I wanted to make sure that without a doubt you knew, in whatever moment you were in, that I loved you and that I cared about you. And so I think that's the most important thing, is just really, realizing that you can be there for someone and you can love them and support them without enabling them. And you have to figure out what that looks like for you. But just this whole idea of being kind of powerless to it, and yet finding hope and faith in it, So.
That's awesome, Megan.
Yeah.
I know, I'm pretty glad we got to do this.
Yes, me
this
too.
I was first
excited.
Side episode of many to come.
Yes.
Sitting down with the family members, I think this is going to probably reach out to a lot of people and help a lot of people, so I'm pretty pumped about it. And I love you, little sister.
Love you.
And thank you for all your love and support through all of this, because I couldn't have done it without it.
You're welcome.
All right, that is it, folks. Thanks for listening.